I'm going to be so real with you. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to go on camera and talk about love and romance because it's so vulnerable. It's almost like embarrassing, you know? Like, I'm someone who has so many crushes. I feel so consumed by the idea of love and like how much I want that. I wake up thinking about it and I go to bed thinking about it. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And bright siding is all about like honesty and truth and vulnerability and like meeting yourself where you are. So this felt like an important topic to dive into. And I think love is one of the scariest things that we can pursue and even admit to wanting. I don't want to do this. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bright Siding Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Bogdan, and today we are talking about love, which has been a surprisingly hard topic for me to sit down and talk about. I've probably sat down to record this like 10 times today, which has been surprising to me because I feel like I'm pretty constantly like engaging with the topic of love and romance in my conversations with friends, in my personal self-reflection practice. I was in therapy for 5 years and, you know, that was a huge theme and a huge topic, but it feels like really hard to sit down and share about my like experience and relationship to love and romance because partnership is the thing that I want the most in this world. I want to write books. I want to have a successful career. I want to keep traveling the world and all of these things. But like, I want partnership and I want to experience like true love. And that feels like something you can't say. It feels like if you're single, the only thing you're allowed to say right now is like how good you are with being single, how self-sufficient you are, how self-reliant you are. And all of those things are true. And I still deeply crave this partnership and this like love and romance in my life. And yes, there are so many forms of love beyond romantic love. I'm not a stranger to accessing love in non-romantic ways. And I don't know if this is like a karmic thing that I just feel so compelled to experience, or if it's like media conditioning, but I don't think that this yearning is like because I watched Disney movies as a kid. I think all humans are here to experience love and love in a romantic sense. Sometimes I question like, am I like thinking about this more than other people? Is this like so consuming to me in a way that it's like not to others? And I don't know. Like, I don't know. I only live in my head, so I can only really speak from my experience. But I don't think that I'm the only person who feels this way. And that's a reason that like this does feel really important to talk about. But it feels scary and almost like wrong to admit that this is something I want so badly. And I feel like in the past, as I've spoken about like love and, you know, love and romance on my podcast and in my newsletter, like I've kind of tiptoed around the subject. And if I am engaging with it, I'm talking about like the crushes that I have, or talking about it in a more like humorous, nonchalant way. But I think this is so hard to sit down and talk about because it's actually something that feels so, yeah, like I said, just like so consuming and like such a true like yearning and desire in my life. And here's what I mean when I say like committed partnership. Like I want to meet like the person that I'm going to share the rest of my life with. Like, why does it feel embarrassing to say that out loud? Maybe it's a New York thing, maybe it's like a millennial thing, but I feel like the discourse around dating right now is so like negative and fear-based, and there are just so many reasons to be afraid of love and commitment, and so few examples of true, enduring, committed partnership. You know, we're constantly bombarded by dating horror stories on Instagram or celebrity divorces, and we're so bombarded with so many relationships that aren't working. And I feel like we're conditioned look for what's wrong with someone before you're looking for what's right with them. And we're all so guarded and so like afraid to fuck up and make mistakes. And I mean, like, I'm terrified of like making mistakes, and I've made a lot of mistakes in dating. Like, I ended my last relationship pretty abruptly right before I turned 27. We were living together. We had been dating for 2.5 years, and an engagement was probably like right around the corner. And I hard ejected from that relationship with like a week's notice. And I did not handle that well. Woke up one day basically and decided I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore. And I left. There wasn't really a lot of room for like conversation around that, or um, like working through it. And I don't think that was the right relationship for me. And I don't think there really was any like working through it once I decided that it wasn't right. But I'm not necessarily proud of how I left that. I left a lot of like pain and confusion in my wake for my ex and his family, probably. And that's something that I think about a lot. It makes me feel really shitty sometimes when I think about it. And I had to make the decision that was right for me, for sure. But, you know, I just like think about how I could have handled that differently. And I think about how that might make someone not want to date me, you know, like, am I a flight risk? Like, I feel like I've learned a lot in the past few years since that relationship, and I've grown a lot. And I don't think I would end up in a situation again where I would be um, leaving so abruptly. But I think another scary part about love and romance and looking at all of this is like acknowledging your vulnerabilities and your insecurities. And like, when you're dating, you're presenting like the best version of yourself, right? It's like job interviews in a way. You're like presenting all of your cool niche interests. You're presenting like the plan and like everything you have figured out. But for me, like, there is so much I don't have figured out. There is so much that I am insecure about, like my career path and my trajectory and even my financial stability. Like, I'm no longer the girl that you can bring home and like tell an easy story to your parents. At one point I was. At one point I was like the girl that worked at Google and the girl that had a 5-year plan. And I was really easy to digest and really easy to fit into a neat little package. And that made me like a really appealing person to date. But I have walked away from all of that. And I'm what? Like, I am carving my own path. I'm like trying to write books. I'm trying to invent a whole life philosophy. Bright siding. Like, I'm inventing a word, you know? And as much as I know and trust and believe in my amazing qualities and the amazing partnership that I bring to the table, I think what makes love and romance and like talking about it so scary again is when you declare that you want love and you get serious about calling that in. It's not just about you looking at your shadow side and sitting with that yourself. Like, I can sit with my shadow all day long. I'm very intimately familiar with my faults and my downfalls, but letting someone in to see those things, see the cracks in the pavement and see the things that aren't perfect and see the ways in which the plan is like not complete or being written in real time, and to expose yourself to showing your insecurities and showing the things that make you crazy and the things that aren't so palatable, to like really allow yourself to be seen is terrifying. And I can't even tell you how many times I've called my mom crying, being like, I just want to find my person, and like, I just want to meet my boyfriend, and like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And I've gone on like more dates than I can count. And I've had all these dating experiences, but I think maybe a year ago, I started to really take stock of the patterns in dating. And a huge block for me is letting someone in fully, whether that's like expressing my true needs and a fear of those needs not being met or not being received, or fear of like speaking my truth and being rejected. I think rejection is like a common fear, but I think I've just developed a real habit of like withholding my truth in dating and like really only trying to lead with the shiniest possible version of me. And I think it's a challenge to sink below the surface and like allow someone to see everything. Even with this podcast and with my broader, like, bright siding work, I can intellectualize something and reflect on something and wax poetic about even getting so sick in Bali and like almost dying. But it is hard to admit all of the ways in which I'm like quite incomplete right now. It's hard to admit in real time the vulnerabilities and the imperfections and like the things that aren't figured out. And I think in this world that we live in, there's just so much emphasis on focusing on the good and not acknowledging the things that you don't have yet that you really want, because it's like, well, shouldn't I be grateful for everything that I have, and like, shouldn't this be enough? And it's hard to sit here and be like, actually, no, it's not enough. I want more. And I also feel like there's so much emphasis on being complete before you meet your partner, or achieving this sense of self-actualization before entering a committed relationship. But I just don't believe that it's possible to reach full self-actualization. I don't think that's like a real destination. I think the beauty of partnership is like growing with someone and like allowing someone to see you on that journey and seeing them on that journey too, and finding that strength and support in each other and like growing together. And I feel like a big fear that I have, and I think this is a common fear, is like, what if you outgrow each other, or like, what if you grow in different directions? And I think love is so risky. Like, it's possible that you grow in different directions, and that is such a scary thing. It's such a scary thing to give yourself to someone, knowing that life has no guarantees. And I think for me, a huge fear is, yeah, not having reached this place of like self-actualization or like full career fulfillment yet, or there's so much like more that I want to achieve. But what I'm realizing is that I really want to achieve that in partnership, and I actually want to be seen in that process. And I think I'm ready in a way that I wasn't the past few years, like, to be seen. And I think it's hard to admit that you are a rough draft. It's hard to reconcile the fact that there is no real finished, polished version of you that you one day arrive at, and you're just like good and free of problems and free of all your insecurities and human needs and worries and fears. I think you grow to different stages, but I don't think any stage of life is without questioning and its challenges. And I think it's hard for high achieving people who are used to going after and getting what they want and like being really ambitious and really successful to admit that actually, like, this is all a work in progress, and to let that through in a dating context, because it's this double-edged sword of like wanting to present the best version of yourself and also like wanting to be seen in your totality and be vulnerable and allow that in. Like, it's hard, and I feel like we're not really talking about how to do that, and we're not really taught like how to be decent and vulnerable and like open in dating. And by vulnerable and open, I don't mean trauma dumping or sharing all of your like insecurities or faults on date one, but I think there's got to be a way to bring in more vulnerability into the conversations and leave room for more imperfection. I remember maybe like a year into this chapter of my singledom, I was probably 27, 28. I met this guy on Hinge that I was like smitten with, and we had like really charged first date, like really high chemistry, la 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 la. And there was kind of that like trauma bonding mistaken for actual connection. You know, that first date was so incredible and felt so good. But like, even though I was sharing anecdotes that made me seem very like confident and self-possessed and able to own embarrassing moments, that was not actually my truth. I remember talking about like a friend of mine who had passed away and thinking in that moment like, oh, I'm so vulnerable and I'm so like open. But then we went on like 3 dates total, I think. And by the last date, we went to the driving range, which was my suggestion, which was like a bad idea because I'm not a golfer. But I was like, I'm a cool girl. Like, let's go to the driving range. Um, which is something I like to do casually, but I'm not good at it. And because I'm not good at it and not very confident in my skills, we get there and I'm like horrible at fucking golfing. And I'm like almost having a panic attack because I'm like, this person is seeing me like not in a way that feels like in my control. And I don't want to be seen in a moment where I'm struggling or vulnerable. Where in retrospect, that could have been like a really sweet and fun moment, just to be like, teach me how to golf, or like, haha. Like now in this moment in time, I think I could easily like laugh and inhabit that space in like a much different way. But I think something I've learned since then, and I've been on a lot of dates since then, is just like, oh wow, it actually is like very hard to be seen in process. And we're constantly in process. And you can so easily mistake chemistry and initial anecdote sharing for like real depth and vulnerability. And I think something I'm challenging myself to do as I engage with dating in this moment is to be really honest and be more vulnerable. And I think even like this episode and talking about this is like a way to kind of declare that intention and stand by it. I feel like in general, it feels really hard to like show your cards and just be like, yeah, I actually like really want a partner, because I feel like everyone's terrified of that and like terrified of commitment and terrified of leading people on. And like, there are just so many things to be afraid of. And I'm not here to say that those fears are like not valid, but in the spirit of bright siding, it's about acknowledging that those fears are there and communicating honestly anyway, because they're going to come out eventually. Like, whether it's at the driving range when you're like, oh fuck, I actually cannot golf, this is really embarrassing for me, or you know, when you're out at dinner and accidentally have too much to drink and like it comes out then, like you might as well lead with your honest truth, you know? And like, I think if someone's not your person, that will be revealed really quickly. And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing where they become a villain because they're not your life match. It's just about, I think, learning how to dance with it a little bit more and like share your needs and know that everyone is out here trying their best and everyone is in that like rough draft format. And um, I really do think that like when you do meet the person, you're not gonna like miss each other, you know? At least that's what I'm telling myself right now. And yeah, I've like really been in the trenches of singledom, I guess you could say. And listen, I love my life. And I think because I'm so in love with my life, it makes that yearning to share this life and to meet that partner even more real. I think I've always wanted love and relationship. You know, when I was younger, like I thought I'd be married like right out of college. I don't know why. No one in my family was like pressuring me to do that. I did not like grow up in the South where like that's normal. I don't know why that was in my head, but I think it would like really surprise my 18-year-old self to like learn that we're single right now. But the point is, I've worked so hard over the past 10 years to like build this life that I am in love with, even in the face of making some really hard decisions, making decisions that don't make sense to everyone, like leaving my job at Google. And I'm so proud of that. And my life is full in so many ways. And like, I still want this, you know? And if nothing else, like maybe the point of this was just to say that and make someone else who feels that way, like, feel a little bit less crazy, maybe, like less isolated. That's what I have to say about love and romance in this moment. I sat down with my friend Daniela in Paris last weekend and we talked about this in relation to a book that we read last year called Calling in the One. But it felt really important to like do a solo episode on this first because I really am challenging myself to like sink a little bit deeper and yeah, like be more open and vulnerable with this project, you know? So thanks for tuning in. I do believe that love exists. I do believe it's out there. It's scary, it's embarrassing, it's all the things, but like I think it's a really human desire. I think it's something that we're here to experience, and this is something that people have been thinking about, talking about for way longer than I've been on this planet and will be talking about for way longer than I'm even on the planet, you know? But I think a big part of like actually welcoming that into my life is to talk about it and share my truth and share my experiences with this. Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you have thoughts or comments, let me know. If there are other like angles about this that you would like me to explore, I'm all ears. Yeah, I have a million and one dating stories, but the point of this wasn't necessarily to like entertain with the stories, but to like really be real. So thank you, and I love you, and I'll talk to you later.